Right. I also want to say thanks to everybody for coming to NEBWG 2025. We've got a lot of great presentations on the docket here. I'm going to, what's that? Closer to the mic. All right. I also want to throw a thanks to John Chenger for putting all this together, putting his name on. He's the host. And of course, Lori for doing all the work that John's name is on. So that's how that team works. It works pretty well. We're all here. We all made it. And every year, NEBWG asks basically one of the old people to get up here and say a few words. It's my turn as the old guy of the day. So what I wanted to do, I've been here kind of working in Pennsylvania for, I think, 33 years now. And dial the clock back a little bit and just kind of show everybody what it used to be like and kind of, talk about some of these things. So bat work in Pennsylvania started in the 1980s. And this was mostly Cal Buchkowski, Jim Kennedy, a couple others. And these few folks are in the room, by the way. Cal's standing back here. Jim Kennedy's here. These people are still doing bat work. This isn't like people who showed up and did a few caves. They're still doing it 30-something years later. But me, I was just a caver. I was in the late 80s. I was going around mapping caves and discovering new passages and doing bioinventories. I've discovered a few new species of cave bugs in Pennsylvania and just kind of out there doing it. And then in Pennsylvania, if you've done many caves here, you'll recognize there are not a lot of walking dry trunk passages. You have to be relatively enthusiastic as a caver to want to go do this. My survey notebook is in my hard hat. Every time I moved from one position to another while I was working in this cave, I had to put everything in my helmet. This is the whole cave. It never opened up. So anyway, in 1991, the Game Commission had kind of, used me for a volunteer for a number of things. I was building the bat cave on Strangford Cave as a volunteer with Cal and everybody's out there. And they just approached me and said, hey, you want to go to work for us? Yeah, of course. I want to get paid to do this. $6 an hour part-time, no benefits. Of course I took that job, wouldn't you? And so anyway, I started in as part of the team. And that's what I want to stress. This is a team. I say me, I, we, whatever. It's all of us. There's a bunch of us, and we somehow, we managed to put together a team of people that was extraordinary. Everybody was dedicated to bats, and we always knew exactly where we were going with things. Except maybe this guy. This is Jim Kennedy. This is a very young Jim Kennedy, by the way. He's somewhere roaming around here in the room today. Jim and Cal did a lot of the early work in the 80s, but then Jim and I did a ton of work. We had a green truck and a free leash. They just let us go. They would say, hey, we want you to do a few things and get them done this year. And we had to figure out when and where and how, and we just did it. We would call each other. I'm going to put a picture of a landline in here because we would actually call each other on the phone Sunday night and say, what do you want to do this week? And we would go out and do it. And so we studied all kind of stuff. But the star of the show, really it was Cal Buchkowski. He was the full-time technician with the Game Commission. He kind of organized, saying, oh yeah, we want to do some of this and we want to do some of that, and flying squirrel boxes and wood rats and bats. So we did all this stuff semi at Cal's direction. Thank you, Cal, for keeping us on track. We never did get thrown in jail for any of this stuff. And all your work with bats over the years. It would never have happened without Cal's direction in all of this. So anywhere there were bats, there was Cal. And so this is the Durham mine. We basically none of these sites were surveyed. We went and found something, went underground, and hell, there's all these bats. And you guys that are post-white nose won't realize, but back in the day, it took 100 bats and or 4 more species before we even considered it an important site underground. There were just bats all over the place. But this became an important one, and anytime we had an important site, we gated it. That's what we knew how to do to protect these things. They weren't threatened as much as they are today, but they were still under threat. People were going in these caves and mines and stressing them out in the winter, so we would gate it, or Cal would develop a gate. And so any place that was new, Mount Rock Cave, I went down there one winter, just grabbed a Nittany Grotto caver, and we smashed my vehicle into a snowdrift to get off the road. Found hundreds of bats. We didn't know they were there. Became an important bat site, so we gated it. And anyway, inside, just a couple pictures of what some of these things look like. This is Jim Hart. Jim Hart was a big part of the team back in the day. Unfortunately, he can't travel much anymore, but I was able to talk to him on the phone recently. He's still happy to tell stories about all these good old days. But look at the bats. I mean, we would go in these things and the walls would be just covered with bats. I mean, it's particular places, not the whole cave, but the places that were suitable for bats. And so Mount Rock, this is Dave Wayland. He did a whole lot with us back in the day. We would find it, we would gate it. And I tell you, gating was a project back then. We didn't have chop saws and efficiency. We had cutting torches and grinding wheels and all this stuff. It was a real project to put a gate on a cave. But we did it. We had to protect these things, and that was how we could do it. And so we're bombing around, gating caves and railroad tunnels. We would look at paper maps and track the railroad grade and say, oh, it went through a hill here. There's got to be a tunnel. There's got to be something there. And we'd just wander out. Here's the Berlin Railroad Tunnel. You wander out there, take your big bat blaster. We had these deer spotting scopes, and we would use these deer spotting scopes down in these high ceiling places. Take a look around and say, hey, let's count some bats. Maybe not this day. That's a lot of water. So you get into some of these places, and you'd be like, oh, well, we can't count the bats. Not quite. How about bring out the boats? So whatever it took. I mean, we were making this all up. It was just on a whim. We'd say, okay, we got to count bats in there. What do we need? Kayaks, boats, canoes. I think in some cases we brought axes to hammer through the ice to get the boats into these sites. It was just a big wall of ice. We would do anything it would take. How about, looking at some of these things from a boat standpoint? How about the human pyramid standpoint? Again, we went through the extra effort, and you might think this is a silly slide. It is a silly slide. This is Mick O'Mahony, who did a lot of work with us. Cal Butchkowski again. Okay, so this is in the Salisbury mine, and there was one bat, and one bat only on the ceiling here. There's a lot of bats in the mine, but this was a solo, and it looked interesting. That is, to this day, as far as I recall, the only Indiana bat ever found in Salisbury mine was found by us doing this. Going that extra effort. And so, do it, get out there. We did it back in the 80s. Jim Kennedy, we had a pretty good motto. It's made a lot of sense. Hey, we haven't done anything stupid yet this week. And that was how we would plan our adventures. And we would just find things that hadn't been done or could be difficult. This is Chris Sanders. Shout out to Chris. He's here today. He's been around almost as long as I have. And he's still doing it as well. Been in bats all his career. This is the New Angola Railroad Tunnel, which some people will recognize. It's become a bat site. There's some monitoring and modifications. It's still in the mix of things. This was from the first day we found the bats in there. Chris was super nice. He was posing under a waterfall. These were 10-second exposure photos on slides. He was a little cold and wet, but we got the picture. We got the site done. Two geographical places in Pennsylvania, the Vanport limestones in the west, where all the caves are miles long, 3 feet high, and 3 foot wide passages covered in water and mud on the floor. Joyous to go visit. But some of them had a lot of bats, and there's a number of mines. If you eat mushrooms, you can see you're from the Moonlight Mushroom Mine, previously Snowtop Mushroom. A lot of the mushrooms that were commercially grown were in these mines. And so we went and we surveyed them all, and they certainly had bats. But not just counting bats, we actually mapped these things. Woodward Cave, this is Chris Sanders again in Woodward Cave surveying. We're actually making the map of this cave. We wanted to know where the bats were, but we also studied the cave invertebrates. And you say, okay, Woodward Cave, some random place. But historically, it had a lot of bats. Now, depending on the year and the count, it's the largest bat hibernacula in Pennsylvania. But we took the time back in the day to actually map it and look through it. I mean, I think I recovered a tardigrade in here. We did a lot of work, not just counting bats. The other side of the state is the anthracite mines. There's thousands of holes. It was like the lottery, trying to win the lottery. You'd throw your plastic up, throw a harp trap in there, and hope that was the hole some bats used. This is Chris Sanders. Again, he's been out on all this stuff. But dialing it back again, Cal got this word. I don't even remember how or who told him it. There were all these bats flying around the woods in the fall. And so there was a coal mine entrance there. We went out there with our harp trap. And this is, if I can make my slide go one forward. This is Jerry Hasinger. This was the boss back in the day. And Jerry didn't handle bats, but it was just Cal and I and Jerry. Jerry was taking notes. On this single day with this trap, we caught 1,000 bats. All right, that's what it was like out there when you hit a site. It was a lot of bats. And so, calling the cavalry, we needed the whole team. So let's take a look at a very young John Chenger. who shows up in the slides here. Yeah, we put up 3 traps. We put up all this elaborate stuff, and yeah, we caught lots of bats. But it was a little hard to show them in a picture. So just for demonstration, I put a light behind there. You can see, oh, I didn't get to that slide. There we go. All the bats flying around here, and all the bats in the cages. These are hardware cloth cages. Those are all bats. All right, we would have these little tubes at the back. Could crawl down the tube and hang out down here, and then we would pull one of these off and replace it with another one. And so you could catch thousands of bats in one night at one site. So anyway, that's kind of the thing that we used to see back in the day. Fire clay mines, whatever it was, we would go underground, we would look at it, we would find bats and write them off if they didn't. But yeah, the fire clay mines were pretty exciting. Bridges, this was before bridges were a thing. Yeah, we knew there were some bridges that had bats elsewhere, not in Pennsylvania. This bridge had bats. So we were going around basically looking at everything and teaching. This is the old Pennsylvania Bat Workshops. Cindy's here. She was helping to host this back in the 90s. Merlin Tuttle's in this picture. We brought in the big guns, and we educated people. We had the head of the National Park Service at these things. It wasn't just Joe from down the street. We brought in people, and we educated with bats. There's actually a mist net. I don't know how with this cast of thousands on top we ever caught anything in that net. But so the second half of everything we did, and I talk a lot about the winter because that's a lot of where bat protection occurs. But there's a huge bat house project, and those of you who are here got to hear Cal talk about some of this. This was his star project. Lisa Williams put all these boxes up here, wires, and say, hey, how much humidity do they need and temperature, and figured out what they need. Cal went around and basically built all these bat houses. We helped him, but this is really Cal's project. And at the end of the day, Cal had a success rate of about 95%. These things work, okay? So we're still improving, still modifying, but this design, pre-white nose, was phenomenal at holding bats. And of course, Cal's never stops at phenomenal. We had to build the bat condo. And so this sucker could hold thousands of bats, and it worked so well, we built another one of these out on an island in the Susquehanna River. If you want a good construction project to figure out the logistics for, try to build one of these on an island in the middle of a river. Anyway, so that's it. We were running around doing all this stuff. I'm thanking a lot of people because there's a lot of people that there's one other person I kind of want to get in here. This young, if I can get my slides here, I'm having a thing. This young lady did a lot of volunteer work, and she never really was hired on by the Game Commission, but I mean hundreds of hours. She was out there chasing wood rats and doing all this caving and stuff. And she showed up today. This is Jennifer Murray in the picture. And right about 1999, in a ridiculous fit of craziness, she agreed to marry me. And so for the last almost 27 years, she's been putting up with this and me. And I wanted to thank her for all of her support over all these years. She's been there every step of the way for me. And the side note, I'm going to just take 2 seconds here and do this. She took a job as a Department of State Foreign Service officer, which we would call a diplomat, and took me all over the world for 20 years. So I would fly back into the U.S., do this stuff, but I was also kind of just bombing around. This is in Panama. I've been all over the tropics and having a lot of fun doing the exact same thing I do here, catching bats, mapping caves, finding new species of stuff. I was able to go to Cuba, because it was close to Panama, and teach a course there on bats to the Cuban biologists. And it's been 20 years of roaming around, doing all these fun things, not knowing how to use clickers. And yeah, the bats are great. The dog-faced bats I get to play with. This is the Jamaican fig-eating bat, and endemic to Jamaica. I just threw a couple pictures of some of these fun ones, the little suction cups for thumbs. So I've been able to do that because we've been all around the world. Whenever I'm living somewhere else with her, I go on my other trips, and a highlight of my work was Africa, getting to mist net flying foxes in the gardens outside of Lusaka, Zambia, and also Borneo. Now, we didn't live there, but I did several trips into Borneo, working with the bat estimations of the wrinkle-faced bats and stuff. And these were National Geographic-funded trips, so I kind of had to up my photographic game and really get some pretty good shots, but they're really big caves. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, that was sort of a highlight of the side trip I took along the way there. So anyway, I just want to end and say, okay, we did all this stuff. It's still there. It's still all there waiting to happen after this. This is Greg Turner, who we all know, with an expression that says it all. You don't even have to describe how horrible this was when white-nose came through and we just discovered all these dead bats, and they're still dead. The Canoe Creek mine went from something around 32,000 bats to 75. You know, take out your calculator. That's a big percentage loss of bats. So I'm not going to cover it. You guys are going to cover it. I did all this stuff back in the day. I want to see and read about all this progress on post-white nose, where we're bringing these bats back and we're protecting them. And it's just some ideas. I just threw these together. Bat houses. We're not done figuring these things out. Bats still use them. Even though the niche isn't kind of full, we can still use bat houses. Migration. We've got lots to figure out about migration. Where are the bats? When are the bats? How do we protect? But we don't know where it is and when it's there. Mist netting. How about some places we haven't been to? Can you see that we're literally catching bats under the watchful gaze of the Statue of Liberty? All right, we're getting into some places that just haven't been sampled. Let's get more nets out there in more places. Talus pals, I don't think at all are worked out. I think there's a lot more to learn about talus pals and what's going on with those. These are just some ideas, and they've all been worked on to some extent. I'm just throwing them back out here. This is NEBWG. This is the working group. These are the people that work on how to figure out these problems. I'm just tossing some ideas. Monitoring sites. Do we have enough of these? This is the Indigo Tunnel in Maryland. It's a great monitoring site. And there's 2 more tunnels. It's not unique. There's 3 of them there. Perfect for monitoring. Not every year. Let's not bother the bats too much. But again, let's set up some monitoring sites, some multi-year stuff. Figure out post-white nose things. And caves. Let's get back in them. Little caves. There's lots of little caves out there. And just see if there's any bats in them. And from Amelia's expression here, it's fun, right? Caving is a good time. It's all fun. And I want to just right at the end here stress, this is fun stuff. When you go into caves, you're doing all this stuff, you can make sure your laundry's clean and pressed. You know, we didn't struggle through this stuff. We really had a joyous time. We had fun doing all this work and ironing clothes. I'll shout him out. Connor's in the room today, the model for this one here. He dragged an ironing board 2,000 feet underground to get this picture. It's called extreme ironing. It was fun. Anyway, I just using it to stress the idea. It's all fun. I'm not trying to make this all seem like tremendous work. Education is kind of, one of my last points to just say, if you're great at bats, teach others. Get people out there and show them how it works. If you're new, get a class. They're certainly available to learn more. Come to NEBWG. Listen to people talk. Listen to the presentations. Learn as much as you can about the bats out there. Because at the end of the day, my final word is we have to protect the survivors. There's nothing else in particular that we can do with bats right now but protect the survivors. And I leave you with that. Thank you.